So this is week 2. Today we'll be looking at the idea of refining your project. It's called Refining an Idea, Designing a Manageable Music Research Project. So those of you that attended the class, which should be all of you, will know the kind of the basic ideas that we're going to talk about here and the gist of what we discussed. But it should serve as a one reference point for those of you who also missed the class. I used the example of Radiohead as kind of an idea, as remember I asked you to think about what you're interested in, and you don't necessarily need to go much further than that for this week. So I'm looking at taking that area that you've come up with and refining it down using the example of Radiohead. So I just plucked that out of the air. Just the statement here is I'm interested in the band Radiohead, but so far this is not a research project, obviously. So research, for postgraduate research projects, you're often required to produce original work or new research, but this isn't necessary for purposes of BA3. But regardless of whether it's undergraduate or postgraduate research, you will need to look at what material is already available, although for different reasons. In postgraduate research, you may need to look at what material is already available to make sure you're not duplicating research. But for our purposes, it's really to see how manageable the project is going to be and how many sources you have at your disposal, which also would be useful for postgraduate research. So if we move on to the stages, we've got this idea, the Radiohead example. We then have to review the sources available. So if we generalize slightly, so let's say you have an idea, you start looking for sources, you find that there isn't much available, and at this level that will cause problems. So we have to then go back to the drawing board. We have to come up with a new idea. So the point of this this process here is that you may need to come up with new ideas so that you can identify a manageable project that will give you the ability to narrow down your area. So the assessment of your own skills and knowledge, beyond kind of looking at what's available, we'll also need to think back to this idea of disciplinary approaches. What disciplines have addressed your area of interest? What do I already know, and what knowledge or skills will I need to complete the project? And how big is the gap between the two in relation to my time scale? So this is important. It doesn't matter if there are gaps in your knowledge, but what's important is that you will be able to fill those gaps in the time scale and be able to complete the project. So obviously, if we look at some examples of that, we'll get a better sense of it. So I've used kind of some quite kind of flippant examples here again. But can I read music? Can I read Spanish? Can I read French? Can I read Raymond Monell's work on semiotics? So the first three of these are kind of do you already have the knowledge to read music? Some of you will, some of you don't. If you're looking into Spanish folk music or something, you may need to you may need the ability to read Spanish. You may need the ability to read French for similar. Say you're doing analysis of Francois Hardy's popular music or something like that. You may need to read French literature. So, and then again, the example here of Raymond Monell's work on semiotics. I'm sure we've all been in the circumstances where we've sat down to read a musicological text, and we've thought, I don't really understand this. And it's not that you may never. It's not that you won't ever understand it. It's that you might not understand it just now. And do you really have the time to kind of look into the field of research, like for example semiotics, and get a good sense of it in your time scale to then use that knowledge to undertake your own research? So again, I can't answer these questions just now, but you'll be able to discuss those types of questions with your supervisor. Do I know how to use the technology this project requires? So that can be anything from digital audio recorders for interviews, or you may need to learn how to work at DAW, or whatever that may be. And then another example, do I understand American musical discourse? So things like the Americans use quarter note, half note, and things to describe note values. Do I have a working knowledge of early 20th century North American banjo styles? That was just a silly example for just for the sake of it might be specific to your project as well. It might not just be a general kind of disciplinary thing. It might be you need some kind of historical knowledge or musical knowledge that's quite specific. And do I have time to learn? Now the answer to this won't always be no. I don't want you coming away with the idea that there's all this knowledge you'll need to know and you don't have time to do it, so think something else. So like for instance the example of the audio recorder, you probably will have the time to learn how to use an audio recorder for doing interviews, those types of things. So I'll stress that the answer won't always be no, whereas learning a whole language like Spanish or French, the first examples there, it's not going to be possible. So again, these are things you'll discuss with your supervisor. So sources, now remember I asked you in groups to think of 3 subtypes for these. So you've got your bibliography, your electronic resources, and your audio-visual sources. So I'd also add to that the sources that you can build yourself, like interview material, concert footage, although the legalities of that might be problematic. But you can build your own resources if you go and interview a band, or and you record the audio and transcribe it. You've then got a text-based source. You've got audio source. If you take a video of the interview, you then got your audio-visual source as well. So there is, it's not just, as we said in class, books, magazines, journals, etc., for bibliography, electronic resources, kind of web-based sources, anything like bands' websites, those types of things. You'll remember this from class and kind of use this to accompany your notes, obviously. Audio-visual sources makes sense. So, records, DVDs, again, we could use YouTube, etc., etc. So you get the idea with this if you've attended the class. If not, kind of speak to someone else about sources. We should be at the stage where we understand the different types of sources, though. So if we return to Radiohead again, types of sources we could have for Radiohead. Bibliography. Your bibliography for Radiohead could include journal articles on Radiohead. There's a few books written on Radiohead. It's kind of a cursory kind of glance at the texts that are available on Amazon. You get books like Music and Art of Radiohead, Radiohead and Philosophy. There are also some journal articles. So I mean, you get the idea of this type of thing. So there'll be magazine articles that are suited to your research projects. It could be interviews with Tom York, or there could be reviews of concerts, reviews of albums, etc. So JSTOR.org, that's really good for it's a housing site for academic publications, for journal articles. So the most appropriate journal, I think, to most of you will be Popular Music, and that's back issues that are housed in JSTOR. But you can run a search over through all the journals that are available. So I did that, and it came up with quite a few results, because some of the articles on Radiohead were actually written by, like, Computer Music Journal was one of them. They're not always Popular Music journals. So if we move now on to the next website, if we look at rocksbackpages.com, I ran a search on Radiohead, and I think there were like 250 results, so that's quite a lot of material to go through. So you would obviously need to narrow that down to what was most appropriate. You wouldn't be able to read it all in time. So that website contains archive material from the history of rock and pop journalism. It also has some videos and some audio interviews and things like that. But it's a really great website for studying popular music, and certainly looking at popular music and journalistic criticism and those types of things. So it's a great resource. So I would strongly advise having a look at that. The next one I had on the list was the band's website. So obviously you'd be able to get information on Radiohead from the Radiohead website. There might be blog posts by the band. There might be, there'll be lots of things on there. So it's worth having a look through. The YouTube channel has 55 videos. So there may be concert footage. There may be beyond the obvious music videos and tracks. There'll be things there that may be of use to your project. If you were to do a project on Radiohead. So hopefully these ideas will all be transferable to other projects, or the approach will be transferable to other projects. I can't obviously present on everyone's project, but hopefully you'll get a general idea of how to approach these things and where to look. So the records, obviously, Radiohead's albums will be very useful. So the obvious is the audio, but also remember liner notes and other things that are contained in the packaging for records may be very useful too, depending on the project. So looking back at all the material, do I have enough material? In looking through your material, you should get a better sense of the types of studies that have been done before. This is broadening out again. You can't exactly duplicate these, but you can use them to guide how you look at your subject. So in relation to Radiohead, to give the example again, Radiohead are very often seen as art rock or prog rock, and I thought this was quite interesting. So how can this be addressed? Some research questions I came up with were, moving on from this, what actually is art rock? What is prog rock? I found that Moore, 1993, conflates the two terms, but is this appropriate? Are prog rock and art rock interchangeable terms, really. And beyond defining that, are Radiohead art or prog rock? Is it a useful term to describe the band? So this idea, like I looked at Moore there, of surrounding literature is important. So we're not just looking at literature that deals directly with Radiohead. In looking at the idea of Radiohead as an art or progressive rock band, we also have to look at the idea of art rock or progressive rock. So Shuker, 2002, defines art rock as a broad musical style or genre linked to progressive rock. It was associated with attempts to combine classical, jazz and rock forms, while at the same time importing ideas from other forms in a variety of ways. It had strong art school connections, so I thought that was interesting, the art school connection. So surrounding literature again here, are we dealing with genre? I thought it was, because the genre seemed to be, it seemed to be what we were dealing with. I thought it was useful in looking back to Franco Fabri's work. Those of you that have been in my second year class will remember Franco, we kind of discussed Franco Fabri's genre rules, which also comes up in Simon Frith's Performing Rights. He has a chapter called genre rules as well. So if you find Franco Fabri's paper, it's available on JSTOR, I think, on genre rules. A little hard to penetrate. It might be worth looking to Simon Frith's Performing Rights. I think it was published by Routledge. I'll include this as a reference at the end. It kind of gives it. I find it slightly more accessible. So there's Franco Fabri's genre rules. I won't unpack them again, but I think Frith does a far better job than me anyway. So I think look to Performing Rights chapter genre rules if you're interested in unpacking those terms. So Fabri and Radiohead. What type of Fabri's rules are used to describe? So what approach are they using, and how does it fit into this theory of genre rules that Fabri presented? So is it are they defined as prog rock using kind of ideological statements? Is it musical statements which form into kind of formal and technical rules? Is it the way that Radiohead act? Are they kind of behavioural rules, or is it to do with the culture that surrounds them, etc., etc.? So how are they defined as prog or rock, if they are prog or art rock, if they are defined as such? What language is used to describe them as such? So you might look at Radiohead interviews, you might look at magazine articles, kind of how journalists respond to Radiohead and what kind of language they use. Are musical signifiers referenced? Can they be found in the audio text? So if kind of musicological language is used in an academic text, so it's unlikely to find that in journalistic responses to Radiohead, or you might find it in interview material, but in academic text you might find that Radiohead is described as art or prog rock because of particular musical signifiers, and then can you find these in the audio text as well? Are these do these ideas transfer to the kind of the average listener as well? That might be interesting looking at. So I think by this point I've got my refined idea what I want to look at. Again, this is just an example. It's just a quick way of showing you how to refine your project. So we've got a research topic here: progressive or art rock, Radiohead and genre construction. So how do Radiohead fit into this idea of progressive rock or art rock, and how's this genre or these genres perhaps defined? Then you'd look to develop kind of a methodology, like how are you going to approach this, and you'd have to write an abstract. Here's just kind of a very, very shortened version of what you would have to write in conceptualizing your project. So look into journalistic responses or critiques of Radiohead, as well as interviews with the band that will seek to identify the way in which they are positioned, or they position themselves within popular music genres, or within a pop music genre for that matter. The terms art rock and progressive rock are common, so I would say that they're commonly used in describing Radiohead. And how can we conceptualize these terms? And do Radiohead fit well? Do their practices and the reception of Radiohead, does that fit well with these ideas? So broadening out again, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And what sources will you use? So I hope this has been of some use to accompany the class, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.